Hey everyone, it's Anthony Ramos. Okay, so sadly, none of us can be at concerts in person right now, but thankfully, some artists are releasing some live albums that are keeping us going, including my favorite artist, MIKA. His new album, MIKA at the Royal Opera of Versailles, just dropped, and I am so excited to be talking to him right now. How are you?
Hi, I'm very well, thank you. It's nice to
Uh,
talk to you.
You too. Okay, this album is beautiful. It's for anyone out there that hasn't listened to it yet. It was recorded in December, and then you decided that you wanted to release it as a live album. And I think I read a quote where you said that you really wanted to show that you are kind of the product of this blend of classic and pop music together. Tell me a little bit about that.
Exactly. The Royal Opera House of Versailles was built, it's in the Palace of Versailles, and it was built for the wedding of Louis XVI to Marie Antoinette. It gets better or worse depending on how you're looking at it. But it was the entire thing is made of wood and painted with trompe-l'oeil, so fake marble effects and gold paint and stuff like that. It is a very protected stage, which is dedicated to classical music. And it really needed a lot of work. So they managed to get a sponsor to fix it, and it took years and years. But of course, who was that sponsor to fix this wonderful theater? Louis Vuitton. So LVMH came in and the family fixed it. So it's this really sacred place in French culture. Very few artists are allowed to sing there who are not classical musicians, who are not from a classical background or singing and playing classical recitals. So when the opportunity presented itself, I knew that I had to do something different. I know how rare it is to do shows in this moment. And I just didn't want to repeat the show that I was doing on tour, a show that you saw in Los Angeles that was supposed to come back to LA, go to Coachella and stuff like that. But I was like, okay, let's do something different. I come from classical music. I started when I was really young as a classical singer at the age of 8 at the Royal Opera House of London. I then went to music conservatory at the Royal College of Music as an adult. I was studying as a baritone, specializing in German song, so Schubert, Brahms, English song, while secretly working as a waiter in the evenings and using that money to pay for the demos, which ended up becoming my first album, Life in Cartoon Motion. At Royal College of Music, we weren't allowed as singers to make jazz or pop music. They didn't want us to, because the training's so intense that it was kind of like, it showed that you weren't focused. So I kept it secret up until the day that I got signed. And I walked in, I was like, I'm leaving. And they were like, why? I was like, I'm making a record. What? You're not ready to make a record? What repertoire are you singing? And I was like, mine. And in the end, it was fine. But so this kind of the classical part of me, I always felt like I had betrayed it. I had let it down, And it's only over time that I realized it was like, that's ridiculous. It is exactly what made me. So this concert is about bridging the gap between those two. A Baroque orchestra, some duets and guest performers who are some of the best classical performers in the world right now, a countertenor, a cellist, whatever. It's just this clash. The entire thing was put together, however, in 5 days.
That's crazy because, I saw on Instagram, behind the scenes, you putting these all new arrangements together, about from these songs that you've been performing for years, but then to kind of redo them all. What was that like? Because it's really fun as a fan of yours to hear kind of this new version of some of, these favorite songs that we've been hearing for years.
It was really in the spirit of urgency, this idea that in this time, in a pandemic, when all of our cultural life is in suspension, the last thing you want to do is just be repetitive or banal. And that kind of gave not only me, but everyone involved in this project, this energy of just like, well, what's the worst that can happen? We're lucky to be doing this. We've just got to do it. let's not second guess ourselves all the time. So some of the arrangements were literally written the night before, rehearsed the next day, put together and modified. People on the floor re-transcribing by hand parts for the orchestra, rewriting little bits here. I mean, it was really like a workshop. And then the show just kind of had to happen. It had to come together. We had one rehearsal on stage, and then we just had to do it. It was quite amazing, that sense of urgency. Urgency, I think, provokes creativity if you just accept it, especially in music. So it was really that, but often what blocks that is that people get a bit scared. And so what was so rare about this was that you had classical musicians, non-classical musicians, but everyone in the same spirit saying, well, let's just try it. Let's just do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to hear that, because I had expected the way that this has turned out, that this was like months and months of preparation, and you had all the time in the world to make this, because it's so awesome. Do you have a favorite of the show, like any of your songs, the way that they turned out? Because it is, I think I have my favorites, but I'm curious if you have a favorite, the way that this new version turned out.
Well, there's three things that are quite beautiful in the show. One of them is a duet with it's me and a male countertenor called Jakub Orlinski. He's quite a remarkable singer. He's definitely the most good-looking classical male singer in the world right now, I would say. But beyond that, he's also a break dancer.
Oh.
And he shows up in skateboarder gear, and with and he sings, and he's really becoming one of the best classical countertenors in the world. So it was fun that, again, all this clash of worlds, and we did this song called Over My Shoulder.
Yeah.
With his very classical voice and my kind of mix of a voice. So that was quite beautiful. But there was one song that was quite powerful, was Origin of Love.
That's the one. That's my favorite. If you asked that's exactly what I would have said. Yes.
Really?
Yes.
I mean, oh, good. Well, I mean, I think it was, it had a particular charge, that song. Look, there was a gospel choir as well on the stage. It's the first time ever a gospel choir has sung on the stage of the Royal Opera House of Versailles.
Yeah.
And not only that, but there's another reason why it was strong. It was, the show was also dedicated to my mom. And I did the show for my mom, who was very, very sick. And I knew that I wanted her to see a show that was beautiful. And strangely, I think for some reason, all the musicians on stage at that time, the orchestra, the setting, all these voices behind me, my mom made it into the audience. She got, there wasn't a way for her to get in with her chair. So two firemen lifted her and brought her in. And she was watching this song. And for some reason, it all came together in that moment. And I think that's what made it particularly charged.
Yeah, no, I totally felt that too. And I was listening to it again before we did this interview, and it just has such a power to it. So, and that's such a nice story about your mom. I'm so glad that she got to see that.
Yeah.
Another thing I want to talk to you about, that it's thinking about your creativity in this quarantine that we're in. In September, you did the I Love Beirut show, which obviously raised so much money for the people in the city that were affected by that horrible explosion that happened in August. Obviously, Beirut is such a important place for you. Tell me what it was like for you to get to do that show and to kind of jump in and help people when they really needed it.
Well, the motivation was to help people and to raise money, but also to help form some sort of emotional connection between the disaster of these explosions in Beirut and the people at home watching the show all over the world. Mm-hmm. So how do you create this kind of communion of spirit, which is what I like to call it? What's so powerful about a concert, in a similar way, whether it's theater, whether it's festival, whether it's concert, and for some people it can also be like going to church or whatever. It's this kind of like unifying of people in one place, all on the same wavelength and living through the same emotion at the same time. And that's really, you know, the most healing thing about going to shows. You just feel like, okay, you're not as alone. And that communion of spirit is so powerful, and it's really what we're missing. We're really, really missing that right now. And when what happened in Beirut happened, I was like, how do I create that kind of grouping of people, grouping of emotions? And even though everyone's going to watch it on their tablets, in different time zones, on their computers, on their home TVs, whatever. So it was about communicating emotion, making it feel kind of urgent and real. Mm-hmm. And to help people understand the human plight over there. I think that at the same time, I was supposed to do it in my garden, where I am right now, which is in Tuscany, in Italy.
Lovely. It looks lovely.
The gardens are there. You can't really see it because it's actually good weather today for the first time in a long time. But I was supposed to just do it in my garden, and of course, in typical style, it just kind of got a bit bigger than it was supposed to, and it got bigger and bigger. And all these guests started saying they wanted to take part. And from one crew of 7, we ended up with 14 crews around the world in 7 different countries. And it was quite a feat. Again, with COVID and all this stuff, it was, but the same thing again, you know, limitations and the lack of routine just kind of provokes creativity. You have to think of different ways of doing things. And that's a creative process, you know, trying to find solutions. Inevitably, you have to be creative to find the solutions. And so again, it just became this kind of new kind of show. It was an experience.
It was amazing. And you know, it's so funny talking about, you know, what you just said about concerts and live shows, how they can, you know, just bring out people. And I think especially for the LGBTQ community, just, you know, feeling loved and inspired and accepted. You know, it's so funny. I've never actually told a story on camera before, but I think, you know, going back to a concert that you did March 25th, 2007, your first in Los Angeles, I think, at the Troubadour. Do you remember that show?
I do. I remember every bit of that show.
Yeah, well, the crazy thing was in 2007, I was still very closeted, not out, not accepting myself. And you know, I remember not having tickets to your show, trying to call everyone I knew to find a way. My friend Celine, thanks Celine. I think she called a friend of a friend of a friend, and somehow we ended up getting tickets to go to the show. And that night I ended up coming out at your concert, and it was—
You for real?
For real. Like I ended up just feeling finally that moment of, you know, accepting myself. And yeah, that was, and after that, the rest is history. Yeah.
Wow, that's remarkable. That's amazing.
Yeah. And go ahead.
So you came out during the show or just after the show?
Yeah, well, the other bit of it that's actually so interesting is, so I ended up, I met someone at your show, and it turns out that
this is amazing.
Yeah, well, wait till you hear this. The gentleman that I met at your show, which, you know, ultimately helped me realize, you know, what I, you know, was looking for, my sexuality, all of that, was your flight attendant on your flight over. And I guess your team—
What?
Yes, and your team—
I remember inviting those flight attendants because we were having like a really good time on the plane. And I invited them all. It was, what were they? Wasn't it Virgin?
Yep.
Okay, I remember, but I never saw them at the show.
Yeah, yeah. And so one of those that you invited it was the gentleman that I met, you know, basically had this wonderful connection with, led to me coming out. And so so basically, had you not, you know, been playing the Troubadour, had I not got tickets, had you not invited these, you know, so thank you for all of that.
That's unbelievable. That's amazing. No, thank you for saying the story.
Yeah,
it's you know,
I think
Well,
about it often. You know, every time I drive by the Troubadour, I'm like, that was my my
that
trip.
was that place.
Being at your show. I remember you walking out to 9 to 5 that night. You know, I remember all of those bits that you did, and like,
Katie opened that show.
yeah,
Katie was
yeah.
the opening act. Katy Perry was the opening act of that show.
Yeah, and yeah, it's just it was all of the it was exactly where I needed to be right at that time, and it was you know, so
Ah, well, that's incredible. Well, thank you
yeah,
for telling me.
thank
You
you.
know, with that, but that goes back to what we were saying. You know, it's not like a lifestyle thing. It's not, we're not, you know, there's a reason why we have shows. There's a reason why we spend so much money on traipsing across, like, you know, hundreds of kilometers to go to a festival where the toilets stink and the food is overpriced and you don't really sleep well for about 5 days or whatever. There's a reason,
Mhm.
because the benefit outweighs the kind of discomfort. It's not just about fun. It's also about this kind of feeling okay that can be provoked by grouping together around music. It's such a unifying thing. Sport too, in a way, but it's different. Sports is not as emotional. It's not as
Right.
spiritual.
Yeah, and I have found, because I've seen your show so many times, and it's every time I'm so pleasantly surprised about your fans and the way that, you know, when I'm next to them, they're so excited and they're so connected to every song. How ready are you to get back on the road and be able to do that again? Because I mean, I know as a fan I'm missing it, but for you, it's got to be such a rewarding experience too.
Yeah, it is, and it's a kind of it's a different kind of language. You
Hmm.
know, it's like a visceral language. It's like you don't speak, you just communicate. And we spend so much time talking, you know, and what's amazing is that normally people say, you know, they talk about a lover and they say, well, with that lover, I don't have to talk, I just communicate. Well, that's exactly what it's like when you're on the stage. It's a way of communicating without having to speak. And it really it feels like when you can't do it, you don't realize how much you need it until you're told you can't do it.
Yeah, yeah, and it's yeah, I'm definitely ready for another Mika show. Are you, last question before I let you go, because I mean we could chat forever, but have you found at least this quarantine time to be a creative time for you in terms of songwriting and maybe putting out some new music in the near future? Because some artists have really found it inspiring, and some people find it a little hard to like write new material because it's just a different time. How's it been for you?
Um, I think it's kind of more complicated. I definitely haven't been tempted to sit in my kitchen singing covers.
Yeah.
Like, like no, like really no. Like, you know, and I just I don't get it.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. And I know then I've been kind of like, you know, a bit insulted for not wanting to do that as well. But it's fine. It's just a preference. I don't feel like it. Like, to me, it's like it's a whole thing, singing, you know, it's a whole there's a whole context. But um what's happened is this kind of decompression of my brain, you know, for the first time. It's really weird. I mean, it's going to sound ridiculous, but for the first time in like 12 years, I listened to a piece of music in my kitchen and I was drinking coffee, not wine, and it made me cry.
Mhm.
A grown 37-year-old man, you know, and but it did have an effect on me. So I've definitely found pleasure in listening to music again, like a 14-year-old kid. And
Thank,
that
yeah.
is so valuable, because if you can listen to music like that, you can make it with more transparency. So I've started writing, and it's funny, after my last record, which was very charged and very much about my family, about my parents, about my identity, the few songs that I've already started writing on now have this kind of are quite free. They're quite irreverent. I'll always remember, uh, you know, when I was at college, I would go out at night and I would go to the Astoria, to GAY at the Astoria. I would go to Madame Jojo's in London. I remember being at Madame Jojo's, and there was a Scissor Sisters gig, and we were like, I don't know, 300 people in a room that really should only have about 100. And we were going crazy, and everyone was touching each other, and everything was, we were in full contact everywhere. You know, it was just like, just energy. And it just made me think about that period. And I remember going to like the tunnels in London Bridge and seeing Fisher Spooner conceptual shows. And I just was like, whoa, that we're missing that a little bit now. That kind of really well thought out irreverence is really missing. That kind of, that sparkle in music, that kind of direct, like that energy. And strangely, that's really in the direction that I'm going in now. And so once we all find each other again in festivals and stuff, that's what I want to bring to the table, along with the rest of my music. But that's the next piece that I'm going to add, because I think it's really necessary. And that's my response. And that's what I've been finding. It's kind of, if you ask me, have I found it easy to write? Well, not necessarily, but the one thing that's come out of it is I've definitely found that thing which is desire again. And that desire is dangerous and can lead you to crazy places, but it's much better to have desire than not to feel it.
Ah, I love that. I'm here for that next chapter. I'm ready for some sparkle. That sounds incredible. MIKA, thank you so much for this chat. And everyone, reminder, because we all need some new music, that MIKA live at the Royal Opera of Versailles is available right now. Go stream it, go download it. You will love it. All the hits, this magical blend of pop and classical. So yes, go check it out. And MIKA, I can't wait to see you in person, hopefully soon. And
likewise,
sparkle at your next show.